is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet honored has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off of us?
The phrase, God is dead, has been misunderstood by people for decades. It's not in fact declaring that God has literally died, but it's instead a metaphor for the impact the Enlightenment had on ideology and wider morality. Prior to the Enlightenment, rulers had to come up with a good way of keeping the peasants from revolting. The easiest thing to do, if you're a monarch, was to say, okay peasants, listen up, the big guy put me in charge, and he told me to tell you that if you work really hard for me your entire life and don't complain too much, you get to go to a place with food, the other dead peasants, stuff. And if you don't, you'll go to a place full of fire and brimstone and pokey boys that'll stab your blimmin' noggin out.
Matthew 13:50, throw them into the blazing furnace where they be screaming and gnashing of teeth.
And if you're a theocrat, you could be a tiny bit more direct. Do what this priest says, or me and the boys will chuck a big rock at you. Then all of a sudden the Enlightenment came along and people had ideas and shit, and one of the most influential ideas this one guy had was, hey, this Louis XIV guy, he's a bit of a prick, maybe we should, do democracy or something? So in the summer of 1789, a bunch of revolutionaries met in the French National Assembly. The aristocrats who wanted a monarchy with repealed power sat on the right of the chamber, and the people who wanted no monarchy and just vibes sat on the left. This is where we got our term right and left wing from. Anyway, back to everyone's favourite proto-insult. Nietzsche believed that because no one could agree on whether God was real or not, society would have to adapt. And the long and the short of it is that maybe everyone believing in that guy that drowned everyone that one time and runs a BDSM dungeon that most people have to live in for the rest of their lives is a bad thing. Or maybe moral and existential nihilism will ensue. Nihilism being the belief in nothing. Existential nihilism is the position that there is no fundamental truth to the universe or higher power, and that life has no ultimate meaning. Moral nihilism is the belief that there is no difference between right and wrong. Which is obviously not a great thing for everyone in your society to believe. Fasting forward to now, and it's pretty clear that the death of God hasn't led to the death of morality. Yet. These ideas paved the groundwork for post-theism, practiced by syphilitic horse-kick man, Hungry Santa, and Freud. So you want to fuck your mum, and you want to kill your dad, and you're sad because you don't have a penis. Author of Sapiens, Yuval Noah Harari, said that around the 19th century, ideology went from theocratic to humanistic. This basically meant that people stopped making ideology to appease a god, and people started making ideology to appease humans. The new question is, how do you appease humans? How the fuck do you appease humans? Harari broke modern political ideology down into three major categories. Liberal humanism, we maximize human well-being through freedom. Marxist humanism, we maximize human well-being through equality. And nationalistic humanism, we maximize human well-being through having questionable views on minorities. Part 2. Marxism. The issue of ideology is that it's totally harmless to think about, but when you start putting your ideas into practice, that's when things can start to get a tiny bit deadly. On November the 9th, 1989, the Berlin Wall fell, and with it, the end of history itself. Well no, the end of political ideology. There was one leading political ideology, according to Francis Fukuyama, and that was Western liberal democracy, baby! Woo! And that probably seemed true, until 2009, when the global financial market had a tiny weeny bit of a total catastrophic failure, and a lot of companies got bailed out with taxpayer money. And also there's kind of microplastics in them. Everything now. And hey, it looks like we're kind of commodifying water now, which is cool because the polar bears seem to be swimming in a lot of it. And one really rich Australian guy owns all of the media most people in our democracy consume. And yeah, I can't go outside anymore. And now that I think about it, maybe the reason I feel so fucking numb all the time is because shit just doesn't seem to be going very well. This doesn't really seem to be working. If only there was a central economic flaw to lots of the way the world is run. Karl Marx was probably one of the most influential thinkers of the 19th century. Which is weird, because if you ask most people what the fuck a socialism is, you get some vox pops that kind of look like this.
Socialism is when the government does stuff. And it's more socialism the more stuff it does. And if it does a real lot of stuff, it's communism.
So it's pretty clear that no one actually has any idea what the difference between socialism, communism, and what Marxism actually is. So I decided to talk to an expert on the subject. Some say he invented the pronoun. Others say he can down an entire bottle of amaretto in just 4 seconds. Full-time drag queen and former child Morgan Pugh. I've completely made a lot of this up, haven't I?